During Lectio Divina this morning before the Blessed Sacrament, I wanted to know exactly what was going on with regard to the original text here, because there are several different translations. Even here it's actually slightly different. It actually says here, if a man determines to come after me, he must renounce self. So it's left like that, self. Take up his cross and follow me. And then it goes on here, in this translation, whoever determines to save himself will destroy himself. And on it goes, well, the Greek, which is what we have as the original, even though Matthew would have written originally, at least partly in Hebrew, is psyche, which is our word psyche, which is soul. And then going back into the Hebrew as they have done, scholars have put it back into the Hebrew from the Greek, they've put in this soul word as a reflexive, because the Hebrew has to do it that way. It comes in with the way of actually damaging oneself. One damages one's soul. But then one can't evacuate actually the eschatological element either. It does also refer to the fact that one can lose one's soul. One can't get around it simply by psychological means and saying one is losing one's very self. It's not enough, because this is the bit that goes on. And also the Lord does remind us of that fact by the saying at the end of this gospel that he actually will be the judge. The Son of Man is going to come with his Father's glory, accompanied by his angels, and then he will repay each man according to his conduct. So, whatever one likes to do and say in this world, e.g. on our chat shows on RTE, making fun of God and all that goes with it, God is patient. If he were to intervene each time, it would be too obvious. But at the point of death, things change radically. At that point, it's no longer a joke. Just think now of all those who go through this life poking fun at all that is sacred, and suddenly finding that it wasn't a joke at all, 1 second after their last breath. Now, I close that parenthesis, but it does also apply to all history. And that's where I want to land today, on this feast of St. Blaise. Unfortunately, his history is in the mists of time. He was a historic figure, Bishop of Sebaste in Armenia. According to tradition, he was, because of his qualities, made a bishop very young in life, and something unexpected happened. You may know from your history that in 312, Constantine crossed the Tiber at the Milvian Bridge. Already we'd had that famous saying, after getting to a point of no return, Iam alia iacta est. Now is the die cast. There was no going back. Well, before the Milvian Bridge, as you may remember, there had been this vision, or whatever it was, over them. They were given to understand that they had to put the cross on their shields. In hoc vinces, in this will you conquer. And they did conquer. And it was the victory which changed history. But even though, with the following year and the publication of the Edict of Milan, there was a complete cessation of hostility with regard to Christianity, it didn't actually quite finish there. Why? Because the initial settlement was that Constantine would have also a co-ruler, a co-imperator, and it was Licinius. And he had authority over Cappadocia and Lesser Armenia. Eventually, in 324, and only then was there clarity made, when Constantine conquered him completely and had free sway. So there was this no man's land. And Licinius, who was not a Christian, was going to carry on the policy, partly out of some kind of spite, it would seem, against maybe his partner, but certainly it wasn't nice for the Christians, and this is how, even after the Peace of Milan, we have this martyrdom, and a very cruel one, extremely cruel, according to tradition. He is portrayed in iconography with some kind of iron comb. It was a virtual woolen thing, made for those who worked in making wool. They had to comb the thing, but this was made out of iron, and they would comb the man. In other words, they were taking off his flesh with this instrument of torture, and all that before he was eventually beheaded. It's rather like what happened to St. Bartholomew. He had his skin removed too. So these were the last trophies before the cessation completely. And by the way, you know that the century which has the greatest number of martyrs in one century ever is the last century. And it may be even more by the end of this century. But there was a colossal number of martyrs in the last century. Now, with regard to this saint, fairly quickly, he began to be powerful in intercession. The question of his linking is being linked with the question of the throat. Seems to have come from the fact that when he was already in prison, there was a child actually who was in trouble and could have suffocated with this fishbone. He was in dire straits, he couldn't breathe. He healed him completely. A lady, it would seem, helped him in prison by giving him food, and also gave him 2 candles, to help him to read his prayers and to celebrate quietly. And so this has remained, the throat and these candles. And the feast has been placed for a good while now, immediately after Candlemas. We're using the best candles of yesterday. But also, what happened was, very soon people realized that he had, even after death, great powers of healing, and they obtained them through devotion to him where he was after death, and also in places built in honor of him, notably Regensburg, where Joseph Ratzinger was bishop. From as early as the 12th and 13th centuries, it was a great centre of devotion, and things would happen there. We have at least 4 clear recorded miracles of healing there due to his intercession. Now, what I want to zoom into specifically is this. The question of the way in which this young bishop obtained powerful merit and power to heal, as it were, is not indifferent for us either. Because we are closer to martyrs. They are ongoing right now through ISIS. They are also close to us relatively, as history is, in this land and in England and Wales across the water, because of what happened actually to other Christians, Protestants. My friend John Hogan appeared the other day. We chanted Vespers together in part, and then he sat down and gave me what he just published. In England, the CTS does these little things, and they're very good. And it is what he's interested in, the martyrs. He's a great man for the saints. And so I've got a few of these, and I'm going to give this one to some of those people anyway, maybe 1 or 2 more next Sunday. But this reminds us of the priesthood and real presence. That was the issue. As it happens, one of them is falling right now at this period in February. I'd like to share this with you because she's a forgotten one and a woman. And notice why she is martyred. It's Anne, Saint Anne. But her name actually was Alice Hyam. She was born in 1563 to, notice, a Protestant family, a Puritan family in Essex. In the 1580s, She and her brother William converted to Catholicism. And not long after, she married Roger Lynn, or Lyne, it's L-I-N-E, also a Catholic. From the time of her marriage, she was known as Anne. These three moved to London to live their Catholic faith more intensely and to assist the suffering church there. Now, remember, these are lay people. And what are they doing? In 1585, while assisting at Holy Mass, Roger and William were arrested. So that's her brother and her husband. Roger, her husband, was sent into exile and died around 1594. Anne sought work as a maid, but renounced it to work in houses of refuge for priests. Now, this is coming close to the crunch, a dangerous business. Eventually running there, such houses. Well known for her recusancy. A recusant is someone who digs his heels in, he refuses to conform. Her home was raided at, notice the date, Candlemas. What day is that? 2nd of February. It's one of the old words that have come through. Candlemas, Christmas. Do you know another one? Easter is actually pre-Christian. That's the god Eos there. It's an old Celtic god of the spring. Actually, the one I'm thinking of is the one that's still there in the term of Michaelmas in Oxford. Michaelmas term. Well, anyway, that's still there. Those three are still in our language. Another one actually that's come down to us is Lady Day. That's still in the Old English, still in our diaries. Lady Day has survived the Reformation. It's the, what do you know what day it is? Lady Day? It's the 25th of March. Still there in English. Anyway, that parenthesis. So it was yesterday, 1601, while Holy Mass was being celebrated. So they knew how to get them, didn't they, when they were assembled. And by the way, our local martyr, John Roberts, was a Benedictine, and he was at the altar when there was a bang on the door. Bang, bang, bang! Open up in the name of the King. Bang, bang, bang! He was still at the altar and he couldn't stop. They bashed the door down and there he was, caught red-handed. He was actually the last gospel. But he kept to it until the end. He wouldn't interrupt the celebration. And not long afterwards, only a few days actually, he was hanged, drawn and quartered at the same place as our local martyr, Oliver Plunkett, Tyburn. These, my friends, are what are awaiting us on the other side. They didn't mess around with joking with God one little bit. It would have been easy for them to get out of this mess. No! The Holy Mass was too serious to be poked fun at. And so, what happened? Ensuring that the priest escaped, notice that bit, these lay people did everything to let the priest escape. There was the case of two brothers, Jesuits, I believe, who were in hiding and they only had one apple between them. They were there for a week. But they gave the safe hidey hole, the big one, to the priest. And eventually, because they were starving, they came out of it to give themselves up as the priests. But then, under duress, it turned out that they were only lay people. And it turned out also that one of them was the great maker of hidey holes, and therefore a great treasure for interrogation. Torture, torture, torture. Get out all the information you can. He died under torture. And it was reported that he died of suicide. Ha, ha, ha. All to protect the priests. Now priests are made fun of. So, she was condemned to death at the Old Bailey for her activities, and she too was hanged at Tyburn just a few days later, the 27th of this month. I'll make a jump. This came to me by post this week. You can't see it, but I'll tell you what it is. This is a scene in the inside of what took the place of what they were dying for, the altar. It's actually what you find in Scotland. This is a Church of Scotland. That means Presbyterian, because that's the established church in Scotland. And what do you see? Well, I'll tell you what you see. The pulpit. And what do you see in the pulpit? A man! A man! A man for a full hour. Okay, the Word of God is there, but the gaze is fixed on a man. Come here, and your gaze is fixed on Jesus Christ, the hidden Lamb for whom these died. And they knew full well the difference. And we, my friends, are too fast and too swift to forget it. I conclude. The devil hates the Holy Eucharist. He hates the real presence with a perfect hate. He wants to get at it. First of all, take away faith in it, and if they have the misfortune to go to it, make sure they're in a state of grave sin, so they gain no goodness, but only more sin by compounding it with sacrilege. Isn't he clever? So this is what we think of on the First Friday. We make up for what is being lacked, and we also try our best to promise to Jesus to always receive him well and to console him there where he is most wounded.